Hello, this is Professor Young, and we have begun our exploration or our look at Chapter 19, which will lead us into 20 and 21, all three chapters dealing with the circulatory system. We are going to begin by looking at just the anatomy. Kind of supporting a little bit of what you've been doing in lab. Once I'm confident that you've got the anatomy down, we will then start moving into the physiology and the anatomy and how they work hand in hand to do what they do within the cardiovascular system, which is not all about pumping blood. There's a lot of other regulatory aspects of the circulatory system, some of which we've already explored when we've talked about the endocrine system, and some we have not yet. And so we will be venturing into that territory soon enough. First, though, I wanted to make sure that we at least knew the basics and that we knew our anatomy. You should be able to identify the various structures being indicated on this slide. If you cannot, let's hurry up and get with the program just a little bit quicker here. We know that this top anatomically speaking, going from the top left down and around to the top right. And this is anatomically speaking. And so what we're referring to is starting our conversation here and moving down and around until we get over to there. So this structure is, of course, the aorta. And then we have, again, moving down, we've got the pulmonary arteries. We have the left atrium. We've got the left pulmonary veins. Continuing down, we have the left ventricle. Over to the right side, we've got the right ventricle. We've got the right atrium. We have the right pulmonary veins. And up top here, we have the superior vena cava, and inferiorly we have the inferior vena cava. And so that's the major structures of the heart as we're looking at it here. That is not including any of the sulci. That is not including any of the coronary veins or arteries. That is strictly just gross anatomy. One of the things that you should also understand is that when we are talking about the layers of the heart, we have three distinct layers that we can identify. Sometimes you can see it with the naked eye, just through gross examination. But to be definitive in your separation of these three, it's best to do this histologically. We do know where they are, and so very often we can point to it and say, yes, this is the epicardium, this is the myocardium, and this is the endocardium. But to really distinguish them, histologically, doing that histologically is the best. The epicardium is, of course, the outermost layer. The myocardium is the middle or the center of the layers. This here is typically the cardiac muscle. When we speak of a myocardial infarction, we're talking about a heart attack that is happening within that layer of the heart. And then the endocardium, which is composed of epithelial cells. Here they're referred to as endothelium, but they are a specialized type of epithelial cell, and they line the chambers of the heart. Looking at this pictorially, we see these three very, again, distinct areas. Of course, the heart, and we have not mentioned this, but we will, but the heart is covered by a thin membranous structure that we refer to as the pericardium. And then moving externally, internally, we have the epicardium, the myocardium, and the endocardium. And you can see basically where they lie at here. So this here would be your epicardium, the outermost layer. Again, the thickest layer is the myocardium, and then we also have the endocardium. And so they are the various layers of the heart that we have. There are some things that, and I want to kind of move our attention to, if you would, this center area that we refer to as the myocardium, because there are some things about this that you already know and or should know. We know that this tissue type is striated. We know that it is involuntary. We know that it is uninucleated. We know that the tissue is branched, or I should say the cells are branched. And we also know that they have these intercalated discs. It's probably key to remember that these intercalated discs are really what is responsible for conducting intercellular communication. In other words, cardiac muscle has this ability to be auto-rhythmic. And when we talk about auto-rhythmic, what we are referring to here is that it has the ability to self-regulate its own electrical conduction system within it. Really, the heart of that ability lies with those intercalated discs. We do have T-tubules in here, but they do lack terminal cisterns. And so that's one of the things that you want to make sure that you keep in mind. Yes, they contain T-tubules. Those T-tubules help to regulate the electrical conductivity through the intercalated discs, but they do lack terminal cisterns. The intercalated discs really contain three major structures: the fascia adherens, the desmosomes, and the gap junctions. Each of these play a unique role in that intercellular communication. And so if we look here with the intercalated discs, we can see that down here are the gap junctions. And again, the purpose of those gap junctions is to provide that electrical stimulation, which is going to coordinate simultaneous contraction within the atrium and the ventricles, respectively. And so they allow, the gap junctions really allow communication in a vertical column so that one myocardium can communicate with the myocardium underneath of it. So again, it coordinates that electrical impulse or that stimulation so that everyone's contracting at the same time. We also, though, have these desmosomes, such as that guy right there. The job of the desmosomes is really to allow the cardiocytes to attach to one another so that the cardiocyte that is here or the myocyte that is there would attach to a myocyte that would be located over in that area as well. And so it allows the cells of the heart to be in constant contact with one another without separating during contraction. And so they allow, again, for intracellular communication. They allow for connection. And to ensure that connection, you will see these little string-like structures right there. There's some more right there. There's some sticking out there as well, which are called the adherens, the fascia adherens. And what they allow is for stretching. All right. What they allow for is stretching between, so that as the cells are pulling apart and contracting, it doesn't lose their connection. And so those are three key areas that you have within these intercalated discs. Remember, histologically, these intercalated discs are darker striations within the skeletal tissue. I will also point out that I want you to notice the great amount of mitochondria that is present within these cells. High amounts of energy production needs to happen within the heart because the heart is continuously beating. And I should mention, I don't think I mentioned this during the lecture, but I will mention it now for you. The heart only uses aerobic respiration. So the cardiac muscle is only using aerobic respiration, which basically what that means is that the heart's never going to tire out because it's constantly using the oxygen. It's not relying on anaerobic respiration or lactic acid or anything else. And so the mitochondria are there to support the use of aerobic respiration. When we look internally, and chapter 20 will get into the exact blood flow pattern that the blood uses through the heart. But again, anatomically speaking, there are valves located within the heart that allow for the monitoring or the directing of blood flow traffic. These valves are made up of dense, regular connective tissue. And there will be cords that we will talk about here in a couple minutes that will attach to these ventricles or these valves, and that will allow for the prevention of backflowing, if you would, of the heart. Keep in mind, a lot of you didn't realize, which is why you're here to learn, but a lot of you didn't realize that when we talk about a heart murmur, what we are referring to is simply those valves that are located within the heart are not properly closing, and it's allowing leaking or backflowing of the blood. And so what you're hearing is in that murmur, you're hearing the whooshing of the blood. And so there are 4 valves that are going to control and regulate the flow of blood. 2 of them are what we refer to as the AV valves, or more commonly, the atrioventricular valves. And there are 2 of them. The atrioventricular valve located on the right side of the heart is what we call the tricuspid valve. And then the left atrioventricular valve is what we refer to as the bicuspid. And so the tricuspid valve would basically regulate blood flow going from the right atrium into the right ventricle, whereas the bicuspid valve would regulate blood flow going from the left atrium down into the right ventricle. Keep in mind also, no, never mind, scratch that. We haven't gotten to blood flow yet. But at any rate, the tricuspid valve regulates between the right atrium and the right ventricle. Bicuspid regulates between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The other two valves that make up the four valves that we mentioned are the semilunar valves, and these are positioned in areas where the blood is exiting the heart. And so we have the pulmonary valve, which is going to regulate the flow of blood leaving the right ventricle into the pulmonary artery, which is going to send the blood to the heart. The aortic valve is going to regulate blood flow leaving the left ventricle, which is oxygenated blood, and so that blood is going to be dispersed between the cephalic region or the head region, the trunk, and the rest of the body. So here is a diagram that shows what exactly, where exactly these valves are being placed. And so, once again, we have connecting the right atrium to the right ventricle. We have the tricuspid valve, and then connecting the left atrium to the left ventricle, we have the bicuspid valve. And again, leaving the heart, we have the pulmonary semilunar valve. Right there. And we also have directly underneath of that the aortic valve right there. And again, you can see that also over in the other diagram located right here. Tricuspid, bicuspid, and so again, that's regulating flow from the right atrium into the right ventricle and the left atrium into the right ventricle, respectively. And we also have the aortic valve and the pulmonary valve right there. One last little thing that I will mention before we end this session. Along the ventricular wall, we have various structures. Most of them are involving muscles or something attached to the muscles. And so you will notice along the ventricles you will have smaller ridges. They are the trabeculae carneae. Then you'll have larger, well-defined areas of muscle, which are going to be called papillary muscles. They are special or specialized trabeculae carneae. Attached to the papillary muscles will be these guitar-like string structures. Again, this is all dense, regular connective tissue when we're talking about the chordae tendineae. And then separating the left ventricle and the right ventricle is the interventricular septum, not the spetum, but the septum. I still didn't correct that. And so here is exactly what we are referring to. And so right in here, right in that area there, you will notice the trabeculae carneae. You will also notice some trabeculae carneae on the left ventricle as well. If you look closely, though, you will see these more well-defined areas of muscle. Right there where the arrows are pointing upward. That, of course, then would be the papillary muscles. And attached to those papillary muscles, coming up, that lead to the valves would be the chordae tendineae. And you can see that they are on both sides, there and there. And just for kicks and giggles, this here simply shows and this here would be the bicuspid valve. But this here basically shows what the valve looks like open and what it looks like closed, and how those papillary muscles work for both contraction and relaxation in conjunction with the chordae tendineae. And again, the chordae tendineae are directly attached or linked to the valves right there. And so that is that. That is where we left off. We will pick back up with this Wimba session after our next lecture, which will be the electrical impulses of the heart. How exactly does a heart generate that stimulation? Again, keep studying, keep reviewing, jot down those questions, ask me in lecture, or always feel free to shoot me an email.